friends, you're in the Military Summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about another massive missile and drone attack that took place during the night between the 12th and the 30th of January of 2026. That was a massive attack, and that attack differs from attacks that were carried out by Russians in the past. So this is the first picture that was published by pro-Ukrainian sources, and this picture was published somewhere around at 2 a.m. of the Ukrainian time. And according to this picture, as you can see, first the Russians attacked the territory of Ukraine with a significant number of ballistic missiles. The sources reported that the Russians were using the Iskander missiles of ballistic type and of a cruise type. So the Russians were attacking the territory of Ukraine, and this is the most important difference between this attack and the attacks that were carried out by Russians in the past. Usually, or since the beginning of the special military operation, the Russians have been using the next tactics. First, they were attacking the territory of Ukraine with drones and with a significant number of drones, just with one purpose: to soften the air defense air defense forces of the armed forces of Ukraine, basically to exhaust the air defense forces of Ukraine. And only then, when the air defense system of Ukraine is being exhausted, the Russians began bombing and attacking the territory with missiles, with ballistic missiles, with hypersonic missiles, and so on. But this time, as you can see, first the Russians attacked the territory of Ukraine with missiles, and only then the Russians began bombing and attacking the territory of Ukraine with drones. So this picture, for example, was published somewhere around at 11 a.m. of the Ukrainian time. And here we can see the full picture of the previous night between the 12th and the 30th of January of 2026. As you can see, the Russians first were using lots of missiles of Iskander type, and then the Russians began bombing or continued bombing and attacking the territory of Ukraine with drones. All in all, the Minister of Defense of Ukraine later published this article where we can see the numbers of how many missiles and drones the Russians were using. According to this article, the Russians during the previous night used 318 missiles and drones altogether. The Ukrainians managed to bring down just 247. Furthermore, this source stated that the Ukrainians managed to bring down just 7 Iskander missiles. Once again, between 1 and 2 a.m. of the Ukrainian time, the Russians just within this hour used more than 20 Iskander missiles, which means that most of the missiles reached the target. Once again, the Russians were bombing and attacking the energy infrastructure of Ukraine. And the most important thing is that right before this attack started, Zelensky stated that there is information from intelligence that the Russians are preparing a new massive strike. So just before an hour, just before 1 or 2 hours before this attack, Zelensky stated about this possible attack, but most likely even he didn't expect that this attack would be so powerful. So Russians were attacking energy infrastructure, and today Ukrainian authorities stated that all of Kiev switches to emergency power outages. Schedules do not apply. Another important thing and another important article was published by a very reliable pro-Ukrainian source. The source stated that due to power outages in Kiev and the region, some supermarkets are temporarily suspending operations, according to retail chain representatives. The Novus chain noted that not all stores can operate as usual as of 9 a.m. About 17 retail outlets in Kiev and the region were closed. Silpo also announced the temporary closure of some stores due to cold temperatures and power supply disruptions. So this is a very important piece of news, because first of all, when we are talking about retail, when we're talking about these stores through the city of Kiev, through the city of Ukraine, we're not talking about money, we're not talking about products, we're not talking about buyers, customers, suppliers. First of all, we're talking about equipment. And if you have problems with energy as Ukraine has, this means that there are very high chances, obviously up to 100% chances, that you will have huge problems with equipment. And basically, within even just in 2 or 3 attacks, after 2 or 3 attacks, after 2 or 3 waves of outages, you will have problems with the equipment, and most likely the equipment will be broken. So this is the situation, and that's a lot of money. And the problem is that you are not able to replace equipment so fast. So that is why we see that these retailers are trying to save equipment they have, but the only way to do this is not to open the mall, it's not to open a store, which means that if you don't open a store, this means that people around the store will not be able to get food from this store. This is the basic logic, right? So if you can't get a food from this store, this most likely will force you to go to another store. But if another store doesn't work as well, this can lead all in all, and in the end, the need to leave the entire territory, let's say to move in the western part of Ukraine where there are less strikes. So as you can see, most of the sources believe that the Russians were trying to destroy energy infrastructure of Ukraine, trying to force Zelensky to probably negotiate with Russians and to accept Russia's demands. But with this story with retails, we see that the picture changes. And maybe this is the main reason, not to destroy the energy or energy infrastructure as energy infrastructure itself, but to by attacking energy infrastructure, we see that more problems are coming to this on the surface. Anyway, let's wait and see what is going to be next. But this story and this article about retail is a very interesting situation that can lead to unpredictable consequences. First of all, to soldiers of the armored forces of Ukraine that are currently located along the line of combat contact. So the Russians were attacking energy infrastructure in Kiev. The Russians were attacking the energy infrastructure in the Dnipro region. During the previous 24 hours, we received additional updates and articles about the situation in this area. Here we can see the changes between the dates, between the 31st of December and the 12th of January. Some huge holes and explosions, consequences of attack. But despite the fact that the Russians used dozens of missiles and drones to attack this power station still works, at least according to different sources, which means that most likely Russians will continue attacking this territory. Furthermore, according to information we have, during the previous 12 hours or 24 hours, the Russians attacked another vessel in the Black Sea. So this video was published yesterday in the evening, and here we can see how a vessel of the armored forces of Ukraine, or how not of the armored forces of Ukraine, according to information we have, this is a commercial vessel. The vessel was trying to leave the Odessa port, probably somewhere in let's say the other direction, but the Russians attacked the vessel with drone, and later the sources reported that there was a fire on board of the vessel, and maybe the Ukrainian authorities, local authorities, were forced to evacuate the vessel towards a more safe place. So as we can see, the Russians began destroying everything that is going in the direction of the city of Odessa or the Odessa infrastructure, which means that in the end this can lead to complete collapse of the entire region when talking about the international trade, sea trade, and so on. And I would like to remind you that Ukraine received lots of weapons, lots of supply, lots of products, lots of important things exactly through this area. And if Russians continue attacking and destroying commercial vessels in this area, this can also lead to very huge problems to the situation along the line of combat contact. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and first let's talk about the Zaporozhye direction. During the previous 12 hours, the sources reported that the Russians continue offensive operation in this area. Currently, the sources are saying that the main clashes are taking place for the settlement by the name of Nova Yakovlevka. We received several days report that Russians managed to enter its southwestern part, but still without changes on the ground. So most likely now the Russians, after the end of the battle for Novoboykovskaya, are putting all their attention and focus in the direction of the settlement of Nova Yakovlevka. So the main clashes are taking place right now, right exactly for this settlement. As for the eastern Zaporozhye direction, very small changes on the ground were recorded along the river of Gaichur. So these are the changes I'm talking about. This information this morning was provided by neutral mappers, according to information we have. Now the Russians are trying to establish complete control over this dense network of the fortifications and to get the settlement of Alexander Konstantinovka from the north. So now we see that the Russians are trying to finish the battle for the Ukrainian side of the river of Gaichur. They tried to connect the footholds between the settlements of Kosivtsevo and the city of Gulyapole. So we're talking about this territory, and now the Russians are completely focused just in this area, and only then most likely Russians will continue offensive operation further in the western direction. As for the Pokrovsk-Dobropolye agglomeration, during the previous 12 hours, the most important updates came to us not even just from the Dobropolye direction, but it's better to say from the Drushkovka direction. So pro-Ukrainian sources published this video where we can see lots of FPV drone attacks on positions of the armored forces of the Russian Federation in this area. We see, according to the picture, that these attacks took place probably not even yesterday or the day before yesterday. We believe that this is a collection of attacks between the end of December and the 30th of January. All of these attacks were geolocated. Most of them were geolocated and added to the map, as you can see, and based on this video we came to the conclusion that the settlement of Shakhova is under complete and strong control of the armored forces of the Russian Federation. So right now in front of your screens you can see the changes on the ground between the 12th and the 30th of January. The Russians finished the battle and the Russians continue offensive operation further towards the settlement by the name of Toretska, and the Russians are trying to advance further from the settlement of Sofiivka in the direction of the settlement of Novopavlovka and Pavlovka. Here we have changes on the ground as well. So this information was provided by a pro-Russian source. As for the Konstantinovka direction, during the previous 12 hours, we received a clarification about the situation on the ground. The Russians, according to different sources, are about to finish the battle for the territory between the Kliban-Bytska water reservoir and N20 road. This information today was confirmed by pro-Ukrainian sources, by neutral mapper. Yesterday, this is the situation by the end of the 12th of January of 2026. This is the end of the 11th. This is the end of the 12th, and this is the beginning of the 13th of January. The Russians are finishing the battle for this territory. Obviously, it will take another week or maybe two to continue the battle for this territory. There are lots of pockets of resistance with the armored forces of Ukraine inside of them. So first of all, the Russians will try to secure these pockets of resistance, and only then Russians will continue offensive operation towards Stepanovka, Dovga, Balka and the southwestern part of the Konstantinovka agglomeration. As for the settlement of Mayak, I would like to remind you that several weeks ago, pro-Russian sources stated that the settlement was captured by the armored forces of the Russian Federation, but this morning pro-Ukrainian sources published this video where we can see how Ukrainians answered the settlement and how Ukrainians raised their flag at the same place where the Russians raised the flag several weeks ago. So as of now, we don't know for sure whether we need to change the map or not, because it seems that the village of Mayaki is in the gray zone and nobody controls the settlement, but probably we will adjust the map because obviously the Ukrainians answered the settlement and they raised the flag. As for the Slavians direction during the previous 12 hours, nothing special. As for the Barova direction, during the previous 24 hours, according to different sources, the Russians finished the battle for the settlement of Redkadub, and the Russians forced Ukrainians to fall back from this area. So as you can see, these are the changes on the ground between the 9th of January 2026 and the 13th of January of 2026. During this period of time, the Russians, as you can see, managed to improve their position significantly, and basically Ukrainians were forced to fall back, and now the Russians, according to this configuration of the map, control up to 95% of the foothold on the Russian side of the river of Nitrius. So the bridgehead is ready to continue offensive operation further in the direction of the settlements of Lazovo, Piski, Radkovsky, with the purpose to establish complete control over the northern part of the Donetsk region. At the same time, several neutral mappers reported that the armored forces of Ukraine continued their counter-offensive operation in the area of the village of Barova. As a result of counter-attack, the Ukrainians managed to improve their positions in the area in the triangle between the settlements of Boguslavka, Novokruglyakova, and Zagryzova. As for the Kupiansk direction, during the previous 24 hours, we received lots of videos. Basically, there was just a video that was made somewhere in December, but for some reason was published just on the 13th of January of 2026. And during this video, we can see how Ukrainians were fighting for the central part of the city of Kupiansk. And in this video, we can see how Ukrainians raised the flag in the most central part of the city above the city hall. Based on this video that most likely was made in the late December, we adjusted the map, we colored this territory, but at the same time we received another video where we can see lots of FPV drone strikes through the gray zone. So which means that most likely we will adjust this territory as well as the territory under complete control of the armored force of the Russian Federation. So the clashes for the city of Kupiansk continue, and we see that Ukrainians are not planning to give up. The Ukrainians are intensifying the pressure. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.